A 19-year-old student named Jack Rutherford was sitting in first class when every passenger on board realized they were only minutes away from death. The pilots were gone. The plane was falling from the sky. 200 lives were about to end. But Jack had never flown a plane before. He never even wanted to. Yet somehow he had to become their only hope. Before we dive in, what time are you listening? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. And please, like and subscribe for more videos like this. The story: Jack was on his way back home from a university conference in London. He was studying aerospace mathematics but had never actually been inside a cockpit. All his training so far had always been on paper: calculations, simulations, and theory work. His parents had spent their entire life savings to send their son to one of the best universities in England. Jack was grateful, but he could feel an immense weight on his shoulders. Every decision he made had to count, because he was fighting for a future that could change everything for his family. That morning, Jack boarded the flight at 7 a.m. It was a regular commercial jet scheduled to fly to Paris. 200 passengers were seated on that aircraft. Families with children, business travelers, elderly couples, even a pregnant woman. Jack took his seat in first class. It was the result of a lucky bump-up, not an upgrade. After settling in, he fastened the seatbelt and pulled out a book about flight dynamics. He planned to read during the journey. The engines roared. The plane ascended smoothly into the morning sky. Everything seemed perfectly normal. About 30 minutes into the flight, the weather turned strange. Dark clouds appeared. Turbulence shook the plane. Passengers gripped their armrests. Some whispered, some prayed, but the turbulence was not the worst part. What followed soon after was terrifying. A flight attendant walked quickly toward the cockpit. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled. She knocked hard on the cockpit door. No response. She knocked again. Still nothing. She grabbed her key and unlocked the door. When she pushed it open, she collapsed onto her knees. Both pilots were unconscious. One was slumped over the throttle and the other was lying back against his seat. The attendant screamed. Another cabin crew member rushed forward. They both tried, shaking the pilots, tapping their faces, calling out their names, but nothing worked. Neither pilot woke up. Panic spread rapidly through the entire plane. Jack heard someone shouting. He unbuckled his seatbelt and walked toward the front of the plane. His heart pounded. Other passengers were crying, screaming, some recording on their phones. When he peered into the cockpit, he could see the pilots were completely out of commission. The control panel was blinking erratically. Alarms were sounding. The altitude was dropping. The plane was literally falling out of the sky. One of the flight attendants looked at him and asked, "Does anyone know how to fly a plane?" Her face was filled with desperation. Jack hesitated. His mouth went dry. His hands began to shake. He had studied aerospace, engineering for almost 2 years. He had done countless simulations. He had memorized formulas. He had read manuals about flight systems. But he had never touched a real control, not once. Yet he knew something. And right now, something was better than nothing. He raised one hand. He stepped into the cockpit. His shoes touched the metal floor. His eyes scanned the control panel. Hundreds of switches, buttons, levers, and dials. The noise was deafening. Alarms blared. Voices crackled through the radio. He sat down in the pilot's seat. His legs felt weak, but he forced them to stay. Steady. A flight attendant pulled the pilot's body out of the way and laid it against the side wall. Jack locked the seatbelt. He grabbed the controls. The stick felt heavy in his hands. He tried pulling back. The plane tilted slightly, but not much. It was still descending. He could hear people behind the door sobbing, shouting, saying their goodbyes. Jack forced himself to breathe deeply. He remembered a simulation he had done at university, stabilizing a plane that was diving rapidly. He pictured it. Recalled every step. First, check the speed. Second, adjust the thrust. Third, level the wings. He breathed again. His left hand reached for the throttle. He adjusted it gently. The engine hummed differently. The Nose of the plane started to level out, just slightly, but it was something. He looked at the altimeter. They were falling through 9,000 feet, only minutes away from crashing into the ocean. He gripped the control yoke with both hands, pulled, back slowly but firmly. The plane responded. It lifted up, slightly. The alarms kept going, but the rate of descent began to slow. Passengers started to notice. Some whispered hopefully. Jack didn't dare turn his head. He was focused on every instrument, every light, every number. Sweat dripped from his forehead. His shirt clung to his back. His heart pounded against his ribs. He was no longer a student. He was the only person who could stop 200 people from dying. Through the radio, a voice crackled. It was from air traffic control. They asked for the captain. Jack grabbed the microphone and answered. He explained the situation. The pilots were unconscious, and he was just a student who had studied some flight theory. There was silence for a few moments. Then the controller's voice returned. Calm but urgent. They told him to stay steady. They would talk him through every single step. Jack listened carefully. The controller told him to keep altitude, to monitor speed, to watch the heading. Minutes passed. Slowly, passengers remained frozen in their seats. Children clutched their mothers. Businessmen stopped typing. Everyone was watching the front of the cabin, waiting to see if this 19-year-old could really do it. Jack followed every instruction. He pulled up the throttle, pushed down the rudder, tilted the wings to balance. Slowly, the plane began to rise. The altimeter showed a positive change. They were climbing again. The engines were running smoothly. The controller gave him a clear path to an airport 30 minutes away. Jack copied the instructions. He turned the plane carefully. Every adjustment felt like a gamble. But he never let go of control. When they were 15 minutes away from the airport, the controller started explaining the landing procedure. Jack had never landed a simulation before. His training had always been about mid-flight control. But now, he was going to have to bring down a full-sized jet carrying 200 people. He listened to every word. The controller told him to reduce speed, lower the flaps, align with the runway, descend at a precise angle, keep the wings level, and flare just before touchdown. Jack repeated the instructions in his mind. He whispered them to himself. They entered the final approach. The runway was visible, long and flat. Lights flanking both sides. He reduced the throttle. The plane started descending. Could see the ground getting closer. 10 seconds. He saw the runway. Center line. 5 seconds. He lowered the nose slightly. 2 seconds. Touchdown. The wheels hit the pavement once, then twice. The plane bounced slightly, but then stabilized. It rolled forward. Slowly, Jack applied the brakes, gently at first, then harder. The plane rolled down the runway and finally slowed to a complete stop. Silence filled every corner of the cabin. Then, explosive cheering erupted. Passengers jumped, hugged, cried. Flight attendants wept. Jack sat in the pilot's seat, his hands still on the controls. He couldn't hear anything. His thoughts were numb. His entire body was still. Finally, he exhaled, a long, deep breath. He had done it. 200. Lives were saved. Aftermath emergency crews arrived within minutes. Medical teams rushed onto the plane. They immediately checked on the pilots. It turned out that both had been affected by a severe carbon monoxide leak in one of the onboard systems. It was a rare malfunction. It had knocked them out within minutes. If it had not been detected earlier, it could have spread throughout the whole cabin. Passengers were safe, but shaken. The pilots were rushed to the hospital. Jack walked off the plane in a daze. Cameras were waiting. Journalists had been tipped off. They wanted to know how he had done it. He explained that he was just a student. He said he was lucky. He said he had great guidance from air traffic control. But the deeper truth was, he had stayed calm. He trusted his education, he trusted his knowledge, and He did not give up. Within days, the story spread across the globe. News outlets called him a hero. University professors praised his thinking under pressure aviation. Experts said it was almost impossible for someone without real training to land a plane. Yet he had done it. Jack received letters from passengers, families, thanks from people all over the world, scholarship offers, invitations to speak at events and international conferences, but what impacted him most was a letter from an elderly woman. She had been on that flight. She wrote that she was flying to see her great-granddaughter, who was born the week before. She said she would have never met her if it was not for him. That letter remained in Jack's pocket for months. It reminded him why he entered the cockpit that day, not because he had knowledge, but because he could not sit back and let people die. Epilogue: Jack returned to university after the incident. He completed his degree. He later became an aviation engineer, specializing in flight safety and pilot assistance technology. He devoted his career to ensuring that no one would ever again be trapped in a situation where the only hope was a lucky student. He worked on building systems that could detect pilot incapacitation, backup autopilot features, and training protocols for cabin crews. His mission was to make flying safer, not just for passengers, but for every pilot. The aircraft company later issued an official statement. They acknowledged the malfunction, overhauled inspection protocols, and implemented more frequent safety checks. They added more sensors to detect dangerous gas leaks. The event also changed how aviation authorities looked at cabin crew training. New protocols were designed to include basic flight assistance modules for flight attendants, simulation. Training became part of the onboarding process. The incident with that plane and the 19-year-old student triggered a reformation across the global aviation industry. Jack also learned something personal. He saw how quickly life can turn. One moment you're a student reading a book, the next, you're responsible for 200 lives. He learned that knowledge alone is not enough. Courage matters. Calm under pressure matters. And the willingness to act, even when you're not perfectly qualified, can make all the difference. Years later, he was interviewed on a national news channel. The reporter asked if he ever felt scared. He laughed and said he felt terrified every second, but he knew he couldn't let fear stop him, because everyone on that plane was depending on him. He also said he hoped no one would ever have to go through what he experienced. But if it did happen, he hoped they would remember, you don't need to be a professional to make a difference. Just a need to try, and a heart that refuses to quit. Conclusion. The story of Jack Rutherford reminds us that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things, that young people with knowledge and bravery can change outcomes, that education is more than just degrees. It's tools that save lives, and that moments of crisis reveal who we really are, whether it's a student saving a plane or anyone stepping up in their own way. We all have the capacity to be heroes when it really matters. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for more stories like this.